To unpack the real issues affecting the Tasman nations, this is Trans-Tasman Talk. Jointly produced by the Unshackled.net and rightminds.nz. Now here's Tim Willems in Australia and Dewey DeBoer in New Zealand.
Hello and welcome to Trans-Tasman Talk Episode 2, and the topic of tonight's show is communist infiltration, and of course that refers to the Chinese Communist Party and a certain other communist in New Zealand. What's been happening in Australia this week? Well, our federal Chinese Australian MP Gladys Liu, she's still answering questions about her links to Chinese community groups which have links to the Chinese Communist Party, and whether all the donations and money she's raised are not connected to the Chinese Communist Party. And this morning we had a spill motion against the New South Wales Liberal Premier Gladys Berejiklian over her springing an abortion decriminalisation bill on the Parliament a few months back without giving her party any consultation. Dewey, your microphone.
Yeah, I thought so. Thanks. Just checking. In New Zealand, we've had a lot of noise about Simon Bridges' visit to China, where he praised the Chinese government for doing incredibly well and raising lots of people out of poverty, completely forgetting to mention that he put them there in the first place. That the Chinese government put them there in the first place. No comments on Hong Kong from him either. We have had an ongoing Labour scandal with regards to harassment and even rape, and the fallout from that is still continuing. Today it was being litigated publicly in the media with various letters being sent by either party, and Jacinda is trying to calm that down, and there have even been rumors or accusations or around her possibly having this basically bringing down Jacinda's government, although I do think that's unlikely. A lot of people would be happy.
Yeah, it's got all of us excited over here in Australia.
Yeah, so I think those headlines are just hype. She will be able to cling on just fine, I think. But this is the second time that Labour is going through this, second time they're having a sex scandal basically, and they're not learning their lesson. They circle the wagons, they protect the people until it's much too late, and it's sort of entertaining to watch them squirm and try and get out of it. When they're the ones who have been talking about how everyone needs to elevate, needs to improve the way they treat women and so on. The number one mistreater of women in New Zealand is consistently the Labour Party. Obviously we've got an abortion bill before Parliament at the moment as well, and the public submissions for that close in 2 days, and it will move on to a short and select committee.
And we are live tonight both on the Unshackled channel and the Right Minds YouTube channel. You managed to get it working for this week, Dewey?
Yes, we have, and hopefully we've improved the technical quality here as well. I think there's a bit less background noise, which people were complaining about, and I've resolved my flickering noises as well. So not noises, but the shimmering that you would have seen in last episode if you were looking at it. And so we have high hopes for a good show this week.
And it seemed like your audience at Right Minds, they were a bit more critical than the Unshackled ones who are in our chat. So they're a bit more scathing, your supporters.
Yes, they tend to be very, very critical, which is good. It's good.
Well, Dua's the one who's every week doing this show, so give him a bit of a break.
That's right.
And you run there's the Right Minds Facebook group as well. That's a bit of a managing task.
Yes, it always is. It is. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to make sure I can follow the chat, guys. And but yeah, managing the Facebook group is always entertaining, and people are always trying to cause trouble. And thankfully, I've got a good team of people helping me out there. Mm-hmm.
So I'm monitoring the Unshackled YouTube chat, and you'll be on the Right Minds one, so we can follow it throughout the evening. If you've got any questions, please post them in the chat, or if you want to jump to the head of the queue on the Unshackled channel, you can send through a super chat, which we'll read it out on air, and yes, you'll be helping this show in its future production, so win-win there. All right, now on to the issue of the week. Now, it's in Australia, probably the past month has been dominated by how to handle the relationship, or to use I would say more alarmist term, threat of China and the Chinese Communist Party. And there's been a lot of scrutiny on our first Chinese Australian federal MP, Gladys Liu, but New Zealand, that seems to have been, well, already captured by the Chinese. When I was doing a bit of preliminary research for tonight, I was appalled that basically both major parties have CCP handlers.
That's a good way to describe them. Yesterday actually marked the 2-year anniversary since Jian Yang was revealed to have been a spy, or as he claims to have been, simply a spy trainer. He was an officer in the People's Liberation Army for 15 years as an instructor, and he came to New Zealand under false pretenses. He didn't disclose his connections to the Chinese Communist Party. He has a high-ranking spot in the National Party, and 2 years on, he's still there. In fact, he just got a promotion last month. So there's absolutely no concern about that. About a year ago, we had revelations that members of the United Front, which is basically the Communist Party aligned group in New Zealand, made $100,000, or attempted to make a $100,000 donation to buy a second Chinese MP, and well, not just any Chinese MP, but of course one connected to the Communist Party. And it actually seems like National's moving ahead with that, even though they haven't got a direct donation that time. They have continual donations from these members of the United Front that come through, and they consider them to be an incredibly valuable asset in terms of keeping the party running. So there's and they don't get called out on it, because of course Labor does the same. They've got an MP, Raymond Huo. He's a bit more of a bumbling communist rather than a member of the or former member of the Communist Party. Although they don't talk about it. So if you say you're a member of the Communist Party, you don't really get a straight answer from them. But he likes to do his electioneering with communist slogans and Chinese and so on.
And from what I understand, the opposition leader, National Simon Bridges, he was on a visit to China and said some very nice things about the government there.
Absolutely, and he had his handler with him, Jian Yang, and he basically parroted all of the lines from the Communist Party themselves. Everything they wanted to hear is basically what he said on TV in an interview with state media. And the Speaker of the House in New Zealand actually chastised him by saying that he sounded more dedicated than an actual Communist Party member.
Well, at least the Speaker's on the ball. I mean, that's a bit of consolation.
And obviously, at around the same time, Raymond Huo, the Labour Party MP, had to delete his tweet where he was praising Simon Bridges' comments.
Oh dear. And New Zealand's supposed to be part of the Five Eyes intelligence network.
Yes, we are, and various reports have identified New Zealand as the weak spot in the Five Eyes. I do believe our intelligence agencies make a little bit of noise around what they do find incredibly concerning, the various donations and connections with members of the Chinese Communist Party in New Zealand politics. There are obviously Chinese groups in New Zealand that are very worried about this, especially the Falun Gong. And I've spoken with a number of people connected to them who actually find themselves forced out of their public activities sometimes because of the influence that the Chinese Communist Party has in New Zealand local and national politics. But on your side of the Tasman, it sounds like there's actually going to be some pushback. And is there any chance that the Liberal MP will be forced to resign, or is she backing down on any of her connections?
Well, there's a lot more awareness and concern about the Chinese Communist Party influence in Australia. Now, this all came about, well, it started with, I'd say, our Australian Broadcasting Corporation, our state media. Normally they're pretty terrible, but their Four Corners program did, I think, about 3 episodes on CCP activities in Australia, and it was actually the beginning of the downfall of Labor Senator Sam Dastyari. I'm not sure if you know who he is, but he used to be the New South Wales Labor State Secretary, became a senator, and so he raised a lot of money in the Chinese Australian community, and he had this relationship with this businessman Hung Jengamo, and he actually, during the 2016 election campaign, Dastyari appeared with Jengamo at a press conference just for Chinese state media, where he basically said that China, they have the rights to the South China Sea and Australia shouldn't interfere with it, which was contradicting both Labor and government policy. And then Hung Jengamo paid his legal expenses and overspend on his one of his parliamentary allowances. And then what really made his downfall was that it was reported in one of the major newspapers that he had a meeting with Hung Jengamo where he suggested they leave their phones inside and talk outside because ASIO, the Australian Security and Intelligence Organisation, our domestic intelligence agency, were listening in. And well, how did they know that Dastyari said that? I wonder who found out that Dastyari said that. So it sort of, I guess, confirmed that what Dastyari suspected, but he wasn't smart enough to have cards there to say, yeah. So that was pretty much the end of him, and he resigned from the Senate in December 2017. He was nicknamed Shanghai Sam, and Sam Dastyari.
I've heard that name.
Yeah.
I have heard that. Yeah.
He's a complete media and attention whore. So with the China issue coming back into the Australian political discourse, he's been keen to get back into the media. Now, I'll give a bit of background on Gladys Liu. She's the federal member for Chisholm, which is a seat in inner Melbourne near where this studio is, and it has a large Chinese Australian population, and it's a marginal seat. But during the 2019 federal election, Gladys Liu, she was the Liberal candidate. The Labor candidate was Jennifer Yang, also a Chinese Australian, and they were both members of these various Chinese associations, which all are connected to the United Front in the end. So it was basically the CCP. They basically had a candidate in both parties for this one seat. So it was sort of, we were talking about it at the time of the Unshackled, that we've basically given one of our seats up to the Chinese. And the reason why Gladys Liu is the one in the hot seat is because, well, she's the one that won the seat. She won it by about 1%, and this was the ABC reporting on her associations a month ago, but it was a interview she did on Sky News last Tuesday evening with Andrew Bolt, one of our conservative commentators, who's not really known for sort of like hard-hitting interviews, but he asked her about the memberships of these associations, and she says, I can't recall being a member, and he's like, you were a member of one organization for 12 years, and she's like, well, if I can't recall, then I can't recall. Like, when you start an interview off with, I can't recall, like, you're in trouble.
Yes, and it's a line Jacinda here likes to use as well.
Yeah, so, and then Bolt asked her, is Xi Jinping a dictator? And she said, I wouldn't use that word. He's elected under their Chinese system. And asked her about China's theft of the South China Sea. She said it's a matter for the foreign minister. And then what capped it all off at the end, Andrew Bolt just came out and asked, are you an agent of the Chinese Communist Party? And she said, the simple answer is no.
What's the complicated answer?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
No, it's what's working to your advantage in Australia is that the people who are accused of having connections to the Chinese Communist Party actually have to front up to the media. So in New Zealand, I'm not sure about Raymond Huo, but especially Jian Yang, he's never done an interview with English-speaking media.
Wow,
So
and he's supposed to be a New Zealand MP?
Yeah, so he's a New Zealand MP, but he's a list MP, and this is where those of you who were listening to last week's episode, we discussed MMP a little bit. And so under MMP, they get a high-ranking position on the list. And so the only people who can really remove them are, the national voters or the national party leadership. And so unless there are enough members of the National Party who want to pull them off the list, or conversely on the Labour Party side, the same thing. So they don't actually win a seat. They don't hold a seat. They just have to have enough internal favour points to remain in that high-ranking spot. And of course, as the voters, there's no easy way to get rid of them, because if they have a high spot on the list, you'd have to have the majority of a party's voters stop voting for them just to remove one candidate. So you combine those things, and it's incredibly easy for them to basically protect these MPs from ever having to front up about their connections to the Communist Party, and even getting simple questions answered like, are you still currently a member of the Chinese Communist Party? That's an incredibly hard question to get an answer to from these MPs.
Don't the parties in New Zealand have, in their constitution, you can't be a member of two parties? And, if you're a member of a foreign political party, that's obviously worse.
Yeah, so they're officially no longer members of the Chinese Communist Party, and they're officially not working for Beijing, but the only people who can confirm that are the MP themselves and Beijing. So that makes it incredibly difficult. We're assuming they're no longer involved in all of these things. But there's actually no way for New Zealand voters to verify these things other than to take the words of the Chinese Politburo.
So as I said, that Gladys Liu interview had actually occurred at the same time as we were going to air last week. So I watched it after, and it was so incredible. And it was described as the gold medal in train wreck, car crash interviews, whatever you want to call it. And so in Parliament the next day, because Parliament's sitting at the moment, there was a bit of a clean-up job where she did admit that she had these associations, that she do an audit of her membership of these groups. And she was comforted by her fellow Liberal MPs, and she shed a few tears. So, from what I know, she did that interview without the blessing of the Prime Minister's office, and so there's been reports in the media now where her office is going to be micromanaged by Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, whose seat of Kooyong is right next to hers. So obviously there was, because that was what I was wondering, how was this interview allowed to take place? How was she not sort of given pre-prepared answers? That's what amazed me. And so the cleanup job the next day in Parliament was, I guess, okay, but there's still question marks about is all the money that she's raised, is that all okay? Because one of the fundraisers she organised a few years back, ASIO, had concerns about a lot of the guest list, and so then again, that's ASIO, our intelligence agency, sort of on the ball more than the major political parties. And Labor, they went on the attack against her, they wanted to make a statement to Parliament, and they used Sam Dastyari as the threshold. They're like, she reaches the Sam Dastyari threshold, and then moronically Scott Morrison played the race card, saying to attack Gladys Liu is to attack the Chinese Australian community, and Gladys Liu, she's got a wonderful migrant story, which it's no matter who it is, it's low to play the race card, because not every Chinese Australian supports the CCP. And then Scott Morrison, he had he basically got caught out lying at a press conference on Friday. He was asked, why is it racist to question Gladys Liu about her associations, but it's not racist to call Sam Dastyari Shanghai Sam? And Scott Morrison said, I don't recall using either of those phrases. And then he'd used in one interview Shanghai Sam, I think, about 6 times in an interview. There were Facebook posts that was basically dug up. And then he went on radio later that day and said, I misheard the question. It was a bit hard to hear. I never denied it. And it was sort of like, yeah, right. So the Liberals are backing her at the moment. I mean, they have a majority of 2. They can afford to lose 1 MP, but you don't really want to lose a marginal seat this early on. But yeah, it's definitely not the Dastyari threshold, because she hasn't contradicted government policy. She's just sort of been very evasive and vague about her views on Australian foreign policy with regard to China, and the defences that she's a new MP and she's just learning. Like, I think that's pretty rubbish, because obviously raising all that money for the Liberal Party over the years. In 2016 she ran the WeChat campaign in the seat of Chisholm for the previous member Julia Banks. So she's a very experienced political operator. She's not like she's just like flunked it into Parliament and she's a real novice.
Yeah, and we're the same thing here, where the National Party and the Labour Party, likely they know they can't afford to lose these MPs because of the massive amount of fundraising that they do. There we have photos of like even our current mayor of Auckland, Phil Goff, being at one of these United Front fundraisers, and there's National Party members and Labour Party members there with all of these Chinese businessmen who are all members of the Communist Party, and they fork out huge amounts of cash on both sides, so that no matter which way the election goes, the Chinese Communist Party always wins.
Yes, well, thankfully in the last federal election it was just 1 seat out of 150.
But in New Zealand, under MMP, it's the seats don't really matter. It's the party structure themselves. The party structure is the most important thing to target in an MMP election.
Yes, because you're basically an agent of the party. If you're a list MP, you're accountable to no one.
Exactly. Yeah. So as long as you don't disappoint the leadership, then you're good to go.
Because even like in Australia, like the senators are elected through tickets, but you're still a senator for that state, and so you do have a constituency. So even though basically the first 2 or 3 are guaranteed to get elected, it's still there's still some accountability. And in every state, every election cycle, there can only be 2 or 3 viable candidates who've got a chance of winning during pre-selections. So there's a bit more accountability even with our proportional Senate system.
Yeah, and obviously New Zealand is just purely national, at a national level. So the entire country, the entire country is your constituency, which doesn't really work so well.
I do believe that our Australian political class, they want to put Australia first, and they've just been asleep at the wheel, and like they've had all these fundraisers and photographs with Chinese businessmen who've turned out to have these CCP links, and so now they're sort of getting the dose of reality. And as I mentioned before, it's because our security agency ASIO is basically, this is like their #1 concern, foreign interference from China. In fact, it wasn't confirmed by ASIO, but it was heard by Reuters that there was a hack attack on our parliament just before the election, and it was put down to China. And so there's a lot of awareness at the moment, and I think that our political class in Australia is like, how do we get out of this like China situation? And so sort of the outgoing chief of ASIO, Duncan Lewis, it was interesting, he gave a speech saying that I'm glad our agency is like educating the public on the threat of foreign interference. And so sort of like ASIO has been sort of ahead of the ball on this, while our politicians are sort of catching up.
And with New Zealand, it's the exact opposite of what you guys are experiencing in Australia. And I do hope that the time comes and that this will be more of an issue at the next election. But it is quite concerning, obviously, for Chinese people here in New Zealand, is that they can't speak out against the Chinese government because they've got family back home and they've got connections, and the organizations that are connected to the Communist Party are incredibly strong, and so you don't hear much noise. And if you come out and criticize it, just like you were saying before, is the response is, oh, that's racist. You can't say someone has a link to the Communist Party, or you can't say that's a problem because that's somehow racist. So we've now elevated communism to the status of race, basically. Obviously, people from mainland China have a bigger problem with that, since they're the only communist government left in the Pacific region. That's something that really needs to be taken far more seriously, so that we don't end up becoming a vassal state of China and doing whatever it is that China wants. And perhaps a problem that you don't have as much that we do have is that China has become our number one trading partner, or almost our number one trading partner. And that means, once you're tied in that close, once you're that dependent on them, they could say, do this, do that, or we're cutting you off. And they're the kind of people who would absolutely blackmail you like that.
Yeah, we're quite dependent on China for our trade as well. But then again, the difference is our political class is aware, and when someone tries to play the race card, there's enough people to still say bullshit. But we have obviously those problems with Chinese Australians feeling they can't speak out against the party because of their relatives back there. But of course, there's more awareness of that in Australia, and more scrutiny and reporting of that. And like I said before, our ABC, they're normally pretty awful, but on Chinese interference, they've been really good. And New Zealand doesn't have a national broadcaster, so...
No, it doesn't. We have several news organizations, some of which run Chinese language versions of their content, in which they scrub any negative references to Beijing or the Chinese Communist Party. So if you get the Chinese articles and translate them back into English, they've suddenly been edited to be very friendly to the CCP. So our media is not one to speak out. And same thing in academia. We only really have one academic who speaks out at Auckland University. Her name is Anne-Marie Brady.
Yes, I know of her.
Look her up. You know of her. And also we have an economist, Michael Riddell. His blog, croakingcassandra.com. He is, quite outspoken about this issue, and that's, he's got an amazing amount of information that he's collected over the years on this topic, and he is sort of the two of them really are lone voices in academia against this problem.
And they've been intimidated as well, haven't they?
Yes. So Anne-Marie Brady has been, burgled. And at least twice, I believe, and neither burglary has been resolved ever, but who did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll pray for them.
Yeah. We can move on to the Labour scandal.
Yes, that's what we touched upon last week, that Jacinda Ardern, she had an alleged sex offender on her staff. And so there's been further developments on that.
Absolutely. It's been the number one story all week. Some political blogs have been running nothing but Jacinda Labour stories all week. And it's been good for traffic for people as well. So it's definitely a very, very live story with developments every day. We have contradicting reports now where high-ranking, so we've had, I should go in the right order, we had almost the day after our last talk, the president of the Labour Party resigned. So that was the first victim.
Nigel Howarth.
Yes.
And he was an old white dude, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And he botched the youth camp scandal as well the year before. So that's the two sex scandals that he's botched. He's gone. The staffer who is behind this was on Jacinda Ardern's campaign team, so it's a very close, tight-knit team. So he Um, Grant Robertson, I think he's the finance minister. Someone in the chat is going to correct me on that. But he was the one who was very, very close to the sex offender, or the alleged sex offender, we should say, because someone in the Labour Party released a letter denying everything and basically contradicting absolutely everything that this girl said in a spin-off article, and she went under the name Sarah. We don't know her real name. So who basically called her a liar. So the Labour Party went from believe women to she's a liar.
But there's not just one woman. There's 7 women in total who've complained.
There are about 12. There are about 12 different accusations, but only one of them is about sexual assault. The other ones are about harassment, intimidation, bullying, and so on. So this particular person is probably nasty because you don't get 12 different people accusing you of things. But it's whether any of this is going to go to a criminal level is that remains to be seen. But in response to being called a liar, she's had her lawyer release several documents today to say, no, here's the timestamps of when I contacted them, like over a year ago. It took me 200 days before they set up a meeting and tried to address these concerns, and I definitely told them about all of this beforehand. And she says she's got emails and has evidence, so it's not so much a he said she said thing now. It is in terms of how this crisis was managed, rather than the actual assault that may have taken place. And so this is the worst place for the Labour Party to have this discussion go, because it's in the public domain, and now it's about what did the Labour Party do. Is she telling the truth, or are the Labour Party telling the truth in terms of how they handled it, rather than what actually happened before it turned into a scandal?
Well, we've talked about Jacinda Ardern being the celebrity prime minister, and basically the handling of this, it sounds like how Hollywood handles allegations of sexual misconduct, because of course we know that Harvey Weinstein was protected for years in Hollywood, and yet Hollywood still has the nerve to lecture the rest of us about sexual assault and misconduct. And Jacinda Ardern, she's still sprouting her feminist credentials, even though this alleged perpetrator was really close to her.
Absolutely, and she's gone on and said, if this can happen in the Labour Party, imagine how much worse it could be everywhere else. But we know it's the Labour Party has some massive problems here in New Zealand, and especially this tends to be their youth. The youth wings, or youth group they have going. There have been several instances over the past years where they have brought in young people to work for them, and then not paid them and treated them terribly, and had terrible working conditions. So basically slave labor.
They're the Union Party.
Oh, they're the Union Party. That's right. It was a union. It was a special unpaid union movement. So they did this, so basically used the youth wing as slaves, and then they had this scandal where they all got boozed up, and some guy who's now under name suppression groped a whole bunch of them, and then it moved on to this next one here where one of their high-ranking staffers is out bullying and harassing people, and like I said, even allegations of rape there as well. So I'm not, she's still trying to sit on this high horse and take the high ground here. But she, even the left-wing commentators are now saying she's basically spent her political capital. Just in 1 week, all of the fairy dust, all of the, the Saint Jacinda, all of it's just gone, just like that.
But she's a national healer. She healed the nation after the Christchurch massacre. Shouldn't that sort of capital last forever?
Among some of the very, very devoted classes, yes. So there are still some people who are very much devoted to her and to defending her. But most of the media, most of the people who have pushed her along, they basically smell blood. There's blood in the water, and they're coming for it. And it just looks really bad, right? And that's the point. If you have a scandal like this, you want to deal with it quickly before it gets out of hand, and you worry about how whether the guy's guilty or not is not something you want to be dealing with in the public. You want to basically, in a political sense, you want to get rid of them first or get them off to the side, and then you want to see, okay, how serious was it, and maybe they can come back if it wasn't, and so on. But they've just gone like, oh yeah, we're going to go and protect our the people who we consider vital to.
Everything was fine, and just blame all the people around her and offer them as sacrificial lambs. That's her only way to survive.
But that's what happened. That's what happened last time, which is that apparently they kept this information from her because they didn't want her to be damaged by it. And then she said, a year ago, she said, "I'm going to make sure that this doesn't happen to me again." So here we are a year later, and clearly either she knew it or it happened to her again. And that is the biggest defense that I've seen from people who are still protecting her, is basically, this is the fault of the patriarchy because the patriarchy is keeping information from Jacinda. But then I would say, well, why doesn't she fire the patriarchy and hire people who are actually competent at their jobs? Like, why does she surround herself with absolute buffoons who can't do anything, if that's the case? Or, she's the problem. She's the weakest link.
Well, apparently there's going to be a new internal probe or investigation. I still don't get, because we've sort of gone through, these sort of things with, church sexual abuse, and, it's these things are crimes. Aren't the police supposed to investigate it? But there's going to be another internal investigation by this woman, Maria Ju QC.
Yeah. So the Labour because it was a Labour staffer, she doesn't want to go to the police. So nobody here has gone to the police. Nobody wants to go to the police. So what can you do? So that's why there's more internal investigations, because the allegations of the accusers don't actually want to get the police involved.
Well, that's how in a civil society things like that should be dealt with.
Exactly. That's what should happen. But they seem to be satisfied that this person will just lose their job, basically. So they're like, we don't want them to go to prison, but we do want him to lose his job.
Oh, well, what's the hope if, they would rehabilitate themselves if they're just sort of moved out to pasture?
Well, exactly. But there's some really weird stuff that goes on in the progressive left that I can't understand, nor will I pretend to understand it. But they have some different standards over there. We have the saying, it's different when the left do it, and that's kind of what's going on here. They have their own. Yeah, it is. I do find the whole situation quite bizarre, and I would say, for instance, the guy should have the benefit of the doubt and so on, but these are the people who say that you shouldn't have the benefit of that. These are the people who say that the accusations should be believed and acted on straight away, and they're doing the exact opposite. In fact, they're accusing the victims of lying.
Well, I would say to this staffer, man up. If you're innocent, then you should be able to withstand the scrutiny.
Yeah, and that's not what's happened, because he's probably, or he most definitely, he's been paid. So he's been put on leave and paid, and the numbers from insiders are he's been paid $50K to go away, and possibly even 3 installments of $50,000 to, go on what I call suspended leave or something like that.
Or is that paid for by the Labour Party or by the taxpayers?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? So we know he's been paid, we just don't know who's paid him.
Well, if it's taxpayers, then Freedom of Information should eventually disclose that.
So they got 20 days to do that. I'm assuming somebody has made OIA requests already. So we're just going to wait and see if that turns anything up.
And you said this has been a big story in New Zealand all week, but I only know about it because, we share news with each other all the time. It hasn't been reported much in Australia at all. Well, we've got our own issues, but it's only ever good news about St. Jacinta that filters across the Tasman.
I've just been told that it's called gardening leave. So he's been put on gardening leave.
Gardening leave.
Gardening leave, yeah. I believe it's a British term, actually. That's made it into our politics. So, yes, so he's enjoying his time off now. Yes, so we've obviously got, Jacinda has actually really been having a bad year, and you've been, I think a lot of it has come through to Australia, and in fact, in New Zealand, it's actually considered that the Australian media has been far harsher on Jacinda than our media has been. And there's been a lot of criticism in the New Zealand media of the way that the Australian media has been covering Jacinda.
In terms of too critical.
Yeah, that's what the New Zealand media believes, that especially Alan Jones and so on. Sky News, but Sky News as well, like the way that they've been treating Jacinda has been too harsh. When I say Australian media, I do mean Sky News, because they're the only ones who will.
It's Sky. It's what's known as Sky News After Dark, which is after 6 o'clock they have their conservative lineup. So it's basically only Sky After Dark and 2GB, which is a Sydney radio station, and they're still going after Alan Jones for the sock down the throat comments, and now his employer Macquarie Media, they're watching him like a hawk. They've got all these procedures in place to make sure he doesn't say anything bad again. So he's still paying the price.
So I see that. So anyway, we get all these nice clips from the Sky News reports about various commentators saying things about Jacinda, and that's kind of how it's presented as the Australian media is covering Jacinda here.
Yes, well, obviously Australia and New Zealand, they always want to attack each other, and so New Zealand media is like, look at those Australians disrespecting our Jacinda, and us in Australia are like, how are you putting up with her? Like, that's sort of like
that's exactly what's happening. So I suppose I can pull this out. We're gonna deal with this. Don't worry. We're gonna make her don't go away, and that's gonna be the reaction we hope very much in the next year.
MAGA 2020.
MAGA, that's right, MAGA 2020. And in fact, she's meeting with Donald Trump tomorrow. I've put my camera out of focus. Sorry about that, guys. It might correct itself soon. So she'll be meeting with Trump tomorrow. So it'll be, or next week rather, and it will be next year. It will be MAGA in America, and it will be MAGA in New Zealand. So there'll be Make America Great Again for Trump in America, and it will be MAGA, Make Our Don't Go Away in New Zealand. So it's going to be an excellent campaign strategy. I'm really liking it so far.
Scott Morrison, he's having an official state dinner this week with Donald Trump. Sky News, they've got, it's a whole themed week. They've flown one of the Sky After Dark presenters, Paul Murray, over there, and he hosts his show from there, and also one of their Sky daytime presenters, which is sort of the normal journalist, Laura Jayes, over there. So they're making a big deal out of it. I don't think Jacinda, she's not getting dinner at the White House where ScoMo is. The coverage is so extensive. I expect to know what they ate. Like, they should interview the chef.
That would be good. But he might just order hamburgers. Like, he might get McDonald's delivered.
Well, ScoMo, he was filmed once ordering at a McDonald's. Like, he actually ordered like just a medium meal, but he was spotted at McDonald's. So yeah, maybe they can bond over that.
That would be good. I've got a question for you that wasn't on our initial list to discuss, but when you mentioned we were talking about Jacinda and you were talking about Alan Jones paying the price, I thought I have to ask about Jacinta Price in Australia, and I've seen some stuff in the news about her, and there's a bit of I don't know if it's a free speech issue here, where I believe she's been asked to not talk, and it sounds like she's been suppressed, and she's as I gathered, a more right-wing voice, and she's an Indigenous Aboriginal as well. So if you could tell me a little bit about what's going on there, and if that's
Yeah, she's been in the public space for a couple of years now. She was an Alice Springs city councillor. Her main issue is stopping domestic violence and, just violence period in remote Indigenous communities. Alice Springs is one of the central Indigenous hubs in Australia, and so she's at the ground level. She knows what she's talking about. But if you point out that there's problems in Indigenous communities, that's racism. You're smearing Indigenous people. That's according to the left. She ran for the seat of Lingiari in the Northern Territory during the federal election for the Country Liberal Party. She didn't win because it's a safe Labor seat. She pointed out during a campaign that Labor had a very sophisticated operation to basically bus all these remote communities in to get them to vote Labor. That's what she's picked up, and she's trying to get some scrutiny onto that. But she's been on a speaking tour around Australia called Mind the Gap, organised by True Arrow Events, one of our local right-wing speaking event tours. And so she's gone all around Australia, not just the major cities, but to the remote ones. And yeah, when she went to Coffs Harbour, she was told she had to get permission from the local Indigenous community. And like, she's an Indigenous person herself. Like, are we saying that now that all the individual Indigenous tribes are their own nations, so it's not just enough that you're like Indigenous anymore? Like, if you're from a particular geographical area, you have to ask the other. Like, that's basically like, it's
I see that way. Yeah.
Like, it's tribalizing like the Indigenous community itself. Like, that's how insane it's gotten. In a Brisbane show, there was one guy who heckled her ferociously and had to be escorted out. Yeah, it's because she says the unpleasant truth that, you know, she's breaking up the sort of the left's, or I'll use the word sort of Dreamtime narrative. Like, and Jacinta Price, you know, she's like, of course they say that she is raising these problems because, or she's a secret alt-righter white supremacist. Like, they've done photoshops of her hanging out with the KKK and all sorts of things that like call her a coconut and that. But like, she's actually like the real issues. She wants to solve those, but the left, of course, it's too hard to solve actual issues, and it's confronting too many unpleasant truths. So just call her a Uncle or Auntie Tom or whatever.
Yeah. That sounds like we have. It actually sounds similar to some of the stuff we have going on in New Zealand as well, where the Maori are like one united people until one of them steps out of line, and then it's tribe versus tribe, and so on, and that, you know, that kind of happens as well. And we're actually seeing a little bit more of that in recent years in New Zealand as well, where that kind of, you know, if you belong to this minority community, you have to vote Labor and so on. And there's actually, you know, people in these communities now challenging this and say, hey, hang on a minute, Labor has done nothing for us. We don't need to all think of, you know, we're not one you know, homogenous entity that is all going to think and act the same and has the same needs. We're actually, you know, there are other people who can help us, and you know, actually saying, you know, these are the issues in our communities that we need to face and so on, which is actually really nice to see, because, you know, it would be battered away before by being like, oh, you know, here's some white guy telling us stuff, he's racist. Now it's you know, you know, the people inside the community are speaking up, and they can't be called racist, except they still try, right? They still try and call them racist, or, you know, Uncle Tom and so on. So it's sad to see that, but it is good to see that the kind of the deadlock there is being broken, and that the you know, very possibly the endless cycle of violence and poverty and all of the horrible things that happen there could be coming to an end soon.
And because she's touring all around Australia, she's met Indigenous people at her events from all different parts, and like, a lot of them have come up to her and said, you know, I really admire you speaking up about this. I just wish that I could have the courage that you have, because I know if that I raised this, the other, you know, like, activists, Indigenous folk are gonna smear me and bully and intimidate me. So yeah, like, yeah, there was a lot of Indigenous people at her shows, and yeah, they, you know, she's not going out on a limb like with what she's saying.
No, that's good. That's really nice to hear that, and nice to see that. And in terms of Jacinda's, you're definitely getting the better end of the deal.
Well, it's spelled differently. Jacinta
know,
Price
yeah.
has the T in it, which stands for terrific, and your Jacinta has the D in it, which stands for dunce.
Thanks. But true, but very true.
Now, Jacinta, she's also, well, your Jacinta, she's trying to decriminalise abortion in New Zealand. That's another one of her sort of feminist dreams. So you're in the committee stage at the moment.
That's right. So the bill passed the first reading, most votes for. What happens in New Zealand is quite interesting because the majority of the votes that are opposed come from the National Party, even though the National Party votes mostly for it. But in terms of voters and support base, the National Party is a far more liberal, like as in liberal left, socially liberal support base, and the Labour Party actually has a more socially conservative support base, but they don't tend to vote for those particular issues. So when it comes to these the votes like this, the National Party tends to be more opposed, while their voters are less happy with that, and the Labour Party is the other way around, where the people who tend to vote Labour are very unhappy with this, and the Labour Party bulldozes on ahead with very few people in the Labour Party opposed to it. They shortened the public submissions to it to 6 weeks, and this is coming up to be a habit for them because they shortened the gun control legislation to 2 weeks. There's upcoming the second tranche of the gun legislation they're talking about as well, and they've shortened that down to 3 months as well, I believe, which is similar to what they've done for this abortion bill. So they know what's unpopular or controversial, and they're definitely shortening that down so they can ram through as much stuff before the election they can get in, and they're trying to get it in so it doesn't fall in too close to the election. And their hope is that because they know their voters are sensitive on this issue, they will then get it over and done with now, so that it's not a problem in an election year. But I think they'll have a lot of submissions to go through. There's a lot of submissions going to be coming in. This may be the most submitted on bill ever. That record was broken last year by the euthanasia bill, which is still currently before Parliament, still ongoing. We'll see how the numbers stack up. And it will be the most radical, the most liberal abortion bill in the civilized world, anyway, excluding North Korea and China probably.
Is it up until birth?
Yeah, so it allows abortion up until birth, and there needs to be a doctor sign off on it after 20 weeks, but not before 20 weeks. And I just said doctor, but I think it's just health practitioner. So basically not a doctor, but an abortionist, actually. So there's absolutely no, there's no restrictions at all. Is the best way to put it. So at any point in a pregnancy, up until you're halfway through labor, you could request an abortion, and it would be signed off instantly.
Well, in our state, Victoria, ACT, Queensland, and Tasmania, we've got, you called it the most radical abortion bill in the world. It's not. It's just basically the same as the radical laws that we've got in our states. And New South Wales is the last state that still has abortion in the Crimes Act. So there's been a big push by the left to remove it there. But Gladys Berejiklian, the Liberal Premier there, she basically facilitated one of the independent MPs, Alex Greenwich, to basically spring this bill on the lower house. Like, there was no time for like public submissions and that. So you said like 6 weeks for submissions. Like, that's ages compared to
really?
what Gladys Berejiklian. It's just like, right, we're going to introduce this bill, we're going to have a vote, then it's going to go to the Legislative Council, and it's going to become legal. And so this is 6 months after she won an election. She won it just 48 seats out of 93, and abortion wasn't talked about as an issue during the campaign. And so her party room was taken by surprise when she and her health minister, Brad Hazzard, had suddenly stitched up this deal to allow this independent MP to introduce the bill. And like, there's a lot of pro-life MPs in the parliamentary Liberal Party. their coalition partner, the National Party, which is the rural party. It's interesting, they in New South Wales have been captured by the far left, and so they basically, on social issues now, are like the Greens, and so all the national state MPs are all pro-abortion. So passed the lower house 59-31, but because there was such a rebellion from her backbench, Gladys Berejiklian said, okay, we'll allow more time for a consultation in the upper house, which is occurring today. Now, there were two backbench Liberal MPs who were quite outspoken about this. Tanya Davies, who used to be the Minister for Women, she was dumped post-election, and Kevin Conley, they actually threatened to defect to the crossbench if 4 amendments, basically to outlaw sex-selective abortions and late-term abortions, were not adopted. There's in the cabinet, there's social conservatives there are Damien Chuthope, who's the finance minister, and Dominic Perrottet, who's the treasurer. He's actually, I think, the deputy leader. And so because it's a conscience vote in life and death issues have always been a conscience votes in the Liberal, Labor and National parties, Gladys Berejiklian is like, I'm not going to tell people how to vote. You can't hold me to ransom because this is a conscience vote. You don't get to dictate how others vote. And so they tried to move Tanya Davies, 2 other backbenchers, Lou Amado and Matthew Mason-Cox tried to move. They announced last night they were going to move a spill motion against her, which are you familiar now with the Australian term leadership spill? We've had quite a few of them.
Yeah, I've been following Australian politics for long enough now to know that that's I'm trying to think if we have a New Zealand specific term for it, but basically a coup of sorts.
It basically means that if
like a vote of no confidence.
Yeah. If a spill motion passes, then the leadership of the party is declared vacant and anyone can stand for the leadership, and then the MPs vote. And so last night, all the cabinet ministers got behind Gladys, saying, we support her 100%. This is not a spill motion. It's a joke. It's a farce. It's going to be a fizzer. So they're really trying to ridicule this spill motion. And John Barilaro, the Nationals leader and deputy premier, said, well, if there's any move against Gladys, that's the end of the coalition agreement, because our agreement's not with the Liberal Party, it's with Gladys. So there was a huge overnight campaign to basically said, these are all fringe nutters, and they withdrew the spill motion in the morning. There's conflicting reports during the day. They claim they got some concessions, but then there's the Premier's office that said no, it's because debate has proceeded in the Legislative Council today as it was intended to plan. So they're basically all the senior people, they've rallied around Gladys and basically stared down these 3 MPs. So Gladys Berejiklian, I still think she's in a pretty strong place, because you can't, over a single issue, even though it is such a wholly emotive issue, you can't really move an elected premier after 6 months into a 4-year term. But of course, doing this, her facilitating this 6 months after an election when we have 4-year terms, and trying to get it done really early on so everyone forgets. I mean, she hasn't done the right thing. She's handled this poorly, but it's not a sackable offence in my opinion.
Here in our parliament, they counted up the votes beforehand, and there have been no. It was in a sense well planned and from a political aspect, and they'll get it through no problems at all. So there'll be no. I don't see them putting any further restrictions on it. In fact, there have been the number one request that I heard while listening to the debate was actually MPs wanting to remove the 20-week limit and not have one at all. And so it ours might even get worse rather than better, but it looks like yours isn't going to change either. There was actually a one backstab that happened in the New Zealand First Party, where Tracy Martin, she's one of the ministers, government ministers, but I can't remember what she's involved with at the moment, for the New Zealand First Party. and she negotiated all of this with Andrew Little, and also I was told Amy Adams in the National Party was involved in doing, counting up all the numbers and getting all of this through. And then the New Zealand First Caucus said they would support this bill, and then the day before it was tabled, one of the New Zealand First MPs at caucus put up a motion to require a referendum for it to pass. So New Zealand First has a procedure whereby they can bind their caucus to a no vote on a conscious issue unless there's a referendum included in the bill. And so New Zealand First will essentially have to withdraw their support for this bill by the time it gets to the third reading if there isn't a referendum baked in, which they won't do unless they can't pass it, with New Zealand First votes. So they've likely factored that in. But that does mean one of the primary sponsors of the bill may actually be forced to vote against it by her own party, which could be interesting. I have got somebody in the chat or private messages tell me that Tracy Martin is the Minister for Children. That's actually what I thought. I didn't want to say it. Like, that sounds really weird. But yes, she is. She's genuinely, she's the Minister for Children, and she's one of the primary sponsors on, the bill that will lead to the deaths of, or at least ease the deaths of 13,000 children every year in New Zealand, and it may increase that number.
I remember a meme that got the Make New Zealand Great Again page zucked in 2017 was Jacinda Ardern, how she talked about ending child poverty, and yet she's pro-abortion, and so who gets aborted?
Yes. Yeah. So the meme was it I will end child poverty through abortion, no more children, no more poverty. And that actually did get that page taken down. And in fact, there was a complaint made to the Advertising Standards Authority and the Electoral Commission because the person who made that meme promoted it. So they paid like $20 to Facebook to show it as an ad. And so there was actually a ruling made by New Zealand's Electoral Commission that particular ad about abortion was against the election rules because it misconstrued Jacinda's position.
Yeah, I remember there was one pro-life group. They actually dressed it up as an official Labor campaign thing. That's what got them into trouble. But I think it was just because your meme was mean to Jacinta. That's why it got taken down. Yeah,
it was pretty bizarre. And actually reading the decision, like they had a panel of 5 people sit around to look at this meme and come up with reasons as to why this meme was misleading.
Well, as I said, these abortion laws have passed in all the other Australian states, and they've managed to easily sideline the pro-life groups, but not in New South Wales, because it is the most conservative state. It's the most religious state. It was a state that had the lowest yes vote for the same-sex marriage vote, and the pro-life activists, even though they got caught off guard by this, have mobilised particularly well. They're led by Dr. Rachel Carling-Jenkins, who was actually a Victorian MLC. She's gone up to north of the border to try and stop New South Wales going down the Victorian path. And they were there today, the activists outside Parliament. They held a really successful rally, a pro-life rally on Sunday, where they got thousands of people there. So New South Wales, that's probably, everyone talks about Queensland as the most conservative state, but they've got 2 communists running the state at the moment, Anastasia Palaszczuk and Jackie Trad. So New South Wales, if you're a conservative, that's probably where you should be, because that's where the activism is.
That's good to hear that. And the pro-life movement in New Zealand has mobilised very well too. The main pro-life campaign is led by Family First, I think, and jointly with Voice for Life. And you, I don't remember, did you interview Bob McCroskey from Family First?
Yes, when I was in New Zealand in September 2017. Yeah. I should explain to our Australian viewers that Family First New Zealand, I'd sort of call it the equivalent, New Zealand's equivalent lobby group to our Australian Christian lobby, even though it's called Family First. Because I remember And when I interviewed Bob McCorsky that day, while I was getting set up, he was taking a phone call from Lyle Shelton, and Bob was going to send off some information about New Zealand's change to same-sex marriage that he could use in the campaign. So they had, there's obviously a working relationship there.
Yep. They work together, and I forget the name of the lady who runs Voice for Life, but they work together here in New Zealand as well. And we don't have a Christian lobby like you have in New Zealand. All of these groups say, we're not Christian groups and so on. But in general, they're led by Christians and run most of their supporters and members and donors and so on will be Christians. And there's a March for Life coming up in December in New Zealand. And last year's March for Life in Wellington was the most attended in New Zealand up until that point. There were several thousand there, and I expect this March for Life to be the most successful one. The largest one that New Zealand will at least have seen ever. And last year, again, there was a former Prime Minister, Bill English, was there. Several national MPs spoke, and we're likely going to see a number of national MPs and I suppose various other groups speak at the March for Life in December. And I've just been told the date, the 7th of December in Wellington, and it will be sort of a march down the main street to Parliament.
Yeah, that's quite inspiring to see that activism and pushback. And yeah, obviously there's very powerful forces in both our countries that want to see these radical abortion bills. But yeah, what's been happening in New South Wales and what you've just described in New Zealand, it gives both our nations hope that there is a culture of life, especially there's a lot of young people involved in these March for Life. So yeah, there is a bit of light. I mean, I was in a very dark place with all the abortion laws passing in Australia, but we're finally seeing some pushback, and it's been great to see. It's good to see it. I don't expect that we'll be able to stop it, but I think that this will be, the real kickstart to the pro-life movement in New Zealand that's been a bit suppressed probably, and that's what happens when the prevailing line is, abortion's in the Crimes Act and it's difficult and so on, and to have an incredibly liberal law like they've had in America with Roe v. Wade for many decades actually is something that really strengthens the pro-life movement. And in America, they've made some amazing advances where several states are basically trying to make moves to outlaw abortion. About 90% of the counties in the United States actually don't have abortion clinics, and so even though they have such liberal laws, it actually works well in the favor of the pro-life movement and changing the culture. And there are, like you said, a lot of young people involved, and I'm seeing it more and more in New Zealand as well. The pro-life movement is becoming younger and younger. And a lot of the older generation who were there when abortion was brought in, they've they're the boomers.
The boomers, basically, and they're like, this is not really an issue that we want to talk about. And I suppose in America, they have the same problem where the boomers like, we just want tax cuts. Don't worry about all of that social conservative stuff. Just, we need corporate tax cuts and everything will be fine. And the younger generations are actually picking up the social issues now, and it's good to see.
Well, that brings us to the end of the show. It was funny how the news worked this week. We both sort of had the same news stories, but just obviously our politics treated them differently.
Absolutely. Yeah. In some cases, the complete opposite has happened in our respective political spheres. But it just goes to show how connected Australia and New Zealand are when it's the same issues that are, facing both countries at the same time.
But I think, there's only one of us who's got to fear a Chinese break-in into their home, and that's you.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, anything I said against the Chinese Communist Party was not serious at all, and this is all. It's like I'm just
devil's advocate.
Yeah, devil's advocate and comedy. This was all like stand-up comedy, basically. So please don't raid my house.
It's just a prank, bro.
Very good. All right, and we've gone over time as well. So thanks everyone for sticking around, and I've been enjoying the comments. Somebody did point out that I have been reading the comments. Yes, I have been. It's nice to have an interactive show, I think, and it's nice to have a good active audience.
Yeah, it's half the fun. The audience, they're great contributors to it. Now, the Right Minds podcast, obviously, we talked about your former co-host, Jesse Anderson, his suicide, which was quite tragic. Is there any more developments in getting the podcast going again?
So I have got some plans for that. I do have, I keep kind of putting it off, but I will have an update episode on the podcast as to the direction that it will be going in. And those of you who are watching, who are listeners, regular listeners of the podcast, you'll remember that the fourth episode I did with Oregon, and it was about the Crusades, if you remember. And he will be coming in, and we'll be doing some more episodes in the coming months.
And I've just launched as part of the Unshackled, but on my own YouTube channel, Wilmsfront, my new live news and information fast-paced show. The debut episode was on Sunday. It's already got a good reception and good views and listens for its debut. So I'm back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Melbourne time, and it'll be the Gladys Trouble show. So first half going to be focusing on Gladys Liu, the Chinese Australian Liberal MP. I'm going to be with Dave Lee, China expert, and then the second half it's going to be Joel Jamal, who's going to talk about the spill against Gladys Berejiklian. And I made the joke on Facebook that it's not a good time to be a Liberal woman called Gladys in Australia at the moment. It's going to be a cursed name, I think.
Very good.
So make sure you subscribe to my channel, and we are going to have a Right Minds channel as well. Well, you're supposed to say that.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Subscribe. You do subscribe to the Right Minds channel, and you can also go to rightminds.nz, and I'm also writing for the BFD. Which has tons of articles every day, mostly New Zealand focused, and some Australian stuff on there as well. And they've been covering the Labour scandals in great depth.
And of course, we cannot do these type of programs without your financial support. There's been a few people in the chat who've been asking where can I donate. The Unshackled, we have multiple ways. We have patreon.com/theunshackled, paypal.me/theunshackled, and our online memberships at theunshackled.net/membership, and we also are on subscribestar.com/theunshackled. Right Minds, are you allowing your supporters to donate money yet?
Yes, I am. You can go to rightminds.nz/donate, and there's a bank account number there, and there's also PayPal and one other thing that I can't remember. I take Bitcoin as well, by the way. If there's anybody out there using Bitcoin, you can go there. But yeah, thank you very much to all of the people who do donate to Right Minds, and we really appreciate all of your support.
Yes, because as I said on Wilmsfront, I'm broadcasting 5 nights a week now, 3 times a week with Wilmsfront, Sunday, Wednesday and Friday nights. Obviously this on a Tuesday night, and then the Uncockables, our joint production with XYZ and the Rational Rise. So we've got great followings now for all of these programs. So obviously our audience there, they're very into the program. So we need your financial support to make sure that you never have to listen to a mainstream media news report or podcast ever again. That's our goal.
Excellent. And good night, everyone.
Good night. We'll see you at the same time next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trans-Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman nations, visit theunshackled.net and rightminds.nz.